Westerners. Through communication, they managed to rewrite history. And with African history as well, they schemed everything to spread lies. This was not accidental. This was systematic. For generations, they spread false information about Africa. They portrayed us as savage, backward, uncivilized. They hid our own history from us. They erased our own achievements. And in their place, they put their own narratives. As a result, some young Africans don't even know the history of Africa, what Africa has accomplished. This is a painful reality. Our own youth, unaware of the rich history of their own continent. Who built the pyramids? When were the universities in Timbuktu founded? What were Africa's contributions to mathematics, astronomy, medicine? They don't know. Because they weren't taught. Because the colonizers told them that we accomplished nothing. That we lived in darkness before they came. Some don't even know that our grandparents fought, were put on the front lines as cannon fodder. And when they returned, they were killed like animals. Does hearing this hurt? It should hurt. Because this is our history. Our grandparents died in Europe's wars. Not by their own choice. They were taken by force. Torn from their families. They died thousands of kilometers away. In a land they didn't know. In a war they didn't understand. Do you know what cannon fodder means? It means the units sent to the most dangerous missions. The least valued. The ones with the most casualties. African soldiers were always at the front. They were the first to face enemy fire. They were the first to walk through minefields. And when they died, they weren't even counted properly in the statistics. Do people know that when France tested its first atomic bomb, it was black soldiers they placed nearby within the blast radius to see what would happen? Yes, you heard right. In 1960, in the Algerian desert, France tested its nuclear weapon. And to measure the effects of this test, to see what radiation did to the human body, they placed African soldiers near the blast. These people were used as guinea pigs. Soldiers serving in their own army, fighting for France, were treated like laboratory rats. Why? Because in their eyes, an African's life was worthless. A black person's death wasn't as important as a white person's death. This racism, this discrimination, was official policy. And what happened then? These soldiers, these victims, were buried in the dusty pages of history. Nobody talked about them. Their families received no compensation. Their children couldn't learn what happened to their fathers. Until we brought these truths to light. Let's bring out the archives. Everything they've used against Africa has been documented. They are meticulous people who record everything. They even documented their atrocities meticulously. How many people were killed? How many villages were burned? How many people were forced to work? It's all written. These documents sit in secret archives. And our task is to open these archives, to bring these truths to light. All of this needs to be communicated, so that young Africans understand. Our youth must know their history. They must know what their grandparents suffered, what they fought for, how they were betrayed. Because the people who don't know their history cannot build their future. A people who don't know their history repeat the same mistakes. A people who don't know their history are easily manipulated. Because there are still many who are asleep. There are still those who continue to speak on behalf of the imperialists. I look around me, and even among our own people, there are those who act as spokespeople for the West. Those who repeat their narratives. Those who defend their interests. These people must wake up. Or at least they must be exposed by those who are awake. They say what they're told to say. Maybe because they're given something in return. I don't know. Maybe they receive money. Maybe they're promised positions. Maybe they've just been conditioned for so long that they can't think differently. But the result doesn't change. They harm their own people. They betray their own history. They darken their own future. But Africans need to understand their history and wake up. This is not a matter of choice. It's a matter of survival. If we don't own our own history, others will continue to write it. And the history they write will always be one that demeans us, belittles us, devalues us. The media should play a very important role in this struggle. The independent media from our countries should contribute greatly to our ideas. Media is the eyes and ears of the people. Media should report facts, expose lies, raise awareness among the people. But unfortunately, some of our own media don't fulfill this duty. But as you can see, even among our own media, there are some that behave like imperialist media. This is a very sad reality. Media organizations in our own countries, founded by our own people, act like parrots of Western media. No questioning, no criticism. Whatever is said in Paris is repeated the next day in Africa. They only react when European media say something. Then they repeat it and amplify it. BBC makes a report. Ours immediately share it. France 24 makes a comment. Ours say the same thing. As if they have no minds of their own. As if they have no thoughts of their own. They just serve as translators. And this translation is always in favor of the West. There are plenty of media outlets in our countries that even fight against regimes like ours. Can you imagine? Media in their own country, siding with foreign powers against their own government. They spend their time repeating the same nonsense that Western media spread. The same lies, the same distortions, the same propaganda. It's shameful if Africans behave like that. It's truly shameful. What is it like to be a spokesperson for foreign powers against your own people? What is it like to deny the struggle of your own ancestors? What is it like to darken the future of your own children? I imagine they must be ashamed to look at themselves in the mirror at night. What do they see in that mirror? A journalist or a traitor? An intellectual or a servant? They should ask themselves these questions and face the answers. If you're paid to spread lies about black people, that's very serious. This is not just a professional ethics violation. This is a crime committed against your own race, your own people, your own history. Repeating the lies of colonizers means making their job easier. It means putting on your own chains yourself. We are raising awareness in Burkina Faso. If you look right now, many media outlets are supporting the movement. Awareness work is being done among youth. Discussions are being organized. Conferences are being held. Documentaries are being made. People are learning the facts. And as they learn, they're waking up. Young people's awareness is being raised through debates and so on. This is very important. Our youth have started asking questions. Why are we so poor, they ask. Why are our resources in others' hands, they ask. Why was our history told to us wrongly, they ask. And these questions are the first step of awakening. This is exactly what we want from media. Teaching people to ask questions. Encouraging questioning. Not accepting ready-made answers. Getting out of the mentality that whatever the West says is true. Returning to our own sources, our own history, our own perspective. You can play a very important role, because you know I said it in 2023 in St. Petersburg, and I'll say it again today. Russia helped save the world. Africa helped save the world. That needs to be said. Who won World War II? If you look at Hollywood movies, it appears that only Americans won. But reality is different. The Soviet Union paid the greatest price to defeat Nazi Germany. 27 million Soviet citizens lost their lives. At Stalingrad, at Kursk in Berlin, the Red Army fought and won. But this truth is minimized, ignored in Western narratives. And Africa? African soldiers fought for Europe's freedom. They died on the fronts, rotted in prison camps, were killed when they came home. But their names aren't in history books. They're not shown in movies. Their names aren't written on monuments. Young people need to understand that. They need to learn real history. Not the Hollywood version, but documented facts. Who fought, who died, who won, who lost. They need to know these things. All those stories told in Hollywood movies and so on, they're false. Just lies. Hollywood is a propaganda machine. It markets American values, American perspective, American interest to the world. And in doing so, it distorts facts, rewrites history. How many Hollywood movies have you seen showing African soldiers in World War II? In how many movies are black soldiers shown as heroes? Almost none. Because we don't exist in their narrative. Or we do. But as side characters in the background, as insignificant figures. The Vietnam War is the same thing. Today you see history is distorted. What did America do in Vietnam? It burned villages, killed civilians, used chemical weapons. But if you look at the movies, American soldiers are always heroes, always victims. The Vietnamese are faceless enemies, but we need to communicate. We need to tell our own story ourselves. We must not let others define us. We must strengthen our own media, make our own films, write our own books. The world must see Africa through Africa's eyes. You see, they don't like it when I speak. They think I talk too much, and all that. They want me to keep quiet so that they can speak, and their version gets through. Western leaders, Western media, they all want the same thing, for Africa to remain silent. Why? Because silence serves them. A silent Africa means an Africa that continues to be exploited. A silent Africa means an Africa that surrenders its resources. A silent Africa means an Africa that forgets its own history. No, I will not be silent. We will not be silent. We will continue to speak. We will continue to tell the truth, no matter how uncomfortable, no matter how dangerous. My biggest regret is having spent a good part of my youth listening to radio stations like RFI and France 24. Yes, I listened to them too. I trusted their news too. I accepted their narratives without questioning too. For years, I've been in countries where these radio stations were shut down. But we would use apps, record their news broadcasts just to listen to them. I was so conditioned that I didn't even think to look for other sources. If RFI said it, it must be true. If France 24 showed it, it must be real, I thought. But at a certain point something clicked, and I started to realize that they were conditioning our minds to accept what they wanted. It was a moment of enlightenment. Suddenly I started seeing everything differently. I noticed how news was framed, how words were chosen, how images were arranged. For example, when they report from Africa, what do they always show? War, famine, disease, poverty. The images that come to mind when Africa is mentioned. Children with flies, conflict zones, refugee camps. They never show our developing cities, our universities, our artists, our entrepreneurs, because that doesn't fit their narrative. It's their narrative. It's what they want us to learn. Africa is backward. Africa needs aid. Africa can't govern itself. They repeat this message constantly. And when you hear it over and over, people start to believe it. Even Africans start to believe it. And since then I've started to see things for what they are. I lifted the curtain. I saw the truth behind the propaganda. And what I saw both angered and motivated me. It angered me because I had been deceived for years. It motivated me because now I knew what needed to be done. I understood that what they're doing is very dangerous. This is not just news. This is psychological warfare. This is not just media. This is mind control. For generations they shaped the thoughts of Africans. They determined how we look at ourselves, how we see the world, how we imagine the future. And today more than ever I realize that they have conditioned the minds, especially of Africans. We were affected the most, because the colonial legacy is still very fresh, because we speak their languages, studied in their schools, consumed their media. They got inside our brains, so you can do a lot to awaken the consciousness of young people. As media, you have a great responsibility. Report the facts, expose the lies, ask questions, question accepted narratives, teach youth to think, so that people understand how the world works, and don't let themselves be led astray by those people. The world is not an equal place. There are power imbalances. There are relations of exploitation. And without understanding these, you cannot change them. My watsilenji of court start on my turn. Let me tell you something else. Do you know what happened at Thiaroye? In 1944, at the end of World War II, African soldiers had fought for France. They had been freed from German prison camps. They were going home. They were brought to the Thiaroye camp in Senegal. And do you know what they asked for there? Just their wages. Just the money they deserved. The money that was supposed to be paid for the years they fought, were captured, suffered. And what did France do? It opened fire. It opened fire on its own soldiers. It opened fire on unarmed men, men just asking for their rights. How many people died? France says 35 in official records. But the real number is hundreds, maybe 300. Maybe 400. Bodies were buried in mass graves. Families weren't informed. The dead weren't declared martyrs. Their widows weren't given pensions. And what happened then? Silence. Decades of silence. This massacre was never taught in French schools. It wasn't in history books. Films were banned. Archives were kept secret. Why? Because it's shameful. Because it exposes their own lies. A country that says liberty, equality, fraternity, massacred people wearing its own military uniform. This is why I want the archives opened. This is why I want the truths to be spoken. Thiaroye must not be forgotten. Our grandparents' blood must not be left on the ground. They say we got independence. They say we became independent in the 1960s. But what kind of independence is this? Our money is still printed in Paris. Our resources are still in the hands of foreign companies. Military bases are still on our soil. Our policies are still dictated from outside. Is this independence? I call this flag independence. We have our flag, we have our national anthem, we have our president. But who has the real power? Who controls the economy? Who prints the money? Who benefits from the resources? Look at the answers to these questions, and you'll understand whether we have real independence. Think about the CFA franc system. The money of African countries is held in the French central bank. We can't print our own money. We can't determine our own monetary policy. What is this if not economic slavery? And when someone wants to change this, what happens? Coups, assassinations, destabilization. What did Thomas Sankara want? He wanted economic independence. He wanted to reject debts. He wanted us to process our own resources ourselves. And what happened? He was killed by his own friend, with France's support. Sankara's legacy is sacred to us. He wasn't just a leader, he was a vision. He showed that Africa could stand on its own feet. Look at what he achieved in 4 years. literacy campaigns, health programs, women's rights, fighting desertification, without borrowing, without begging for aid, without kneeling. And today I'm trying to walk the same path. Is it easy? No. Is it dangerous? Yes. But there's no other way. Africa will either wake up and determine its own destiny, or it will continue to be exploited forever. The West accuses us of terrorism. They're not fighting terrorists. They're committing human rights violations, they say. But wait a minute. Where did these terrorists come from? Who armed them? Who bombed Libya and destabilized the region? How did the weapons get here? They don't ask these questions. There's a terror problem in the Sahel. True. But what's the source of this problem? What happened when NATO intervened in Libya? Gaddafi was overthrown. The state collapsed. Weapons spread everywhere. Jihadist groups grew stronger. And now we're trying to clean up this chaos. When our own people want to arm themselves and defend their homeland, what do Westerners say? Militia, they say. Human rights violation, they say. But when people in Europe arm themselves to defend their homeland, what do they say? Patriot, they say. Resistance, they say. Isn't this hypocrisy? In Europe, partisans are heroes. In Africa, they're terrorists. In Europe, resistance is honor. In Africa, it's rebellion. Same action, different names. Why? Because in their eyes, we're not equal. Our lives, our land, our future are not as valuable as theirs. Rhymes being from made as valuable as theirs. I'm addressing young Africans. Wake up. Open your eyes. Start questioning what you're told. Just because everyone says so doesn't mean something is true. Just because it's always been done this way doesn't mean something is right. Learn your history. Our real history. Not the colonizer's version. Learn your ancestors' achievements, struggles, sacrifices. Remember that you stand on their shoulders, and then take action. Knowledge is power, but meaningless without action. Share what you learn. Expose the lies you see. Work for change, individually and collectively. Africa's future is in your hands. You will decide. Will you live with a colonial mentality, or as free people? Will you let others decide about you, or will you determine your own destiny? I know the answer, and I think you know it too. Africa is waking up. This awakening can no longer be stopped. We will complete the unfinished struggle of our grandparents. We will leave a free continent to our children, and history will prove us right. Homeland or death, we shall conquer. Let me speak about the nuclear tests again, because this is something that burns in my heart. In February 1960, France detonated its first atomic bomb in the Algerian Sahara, near a place called Regan. They called it Gerbois Blue, Blue Gerbois, a 70-kiloton explosion that made France the fourth nuclear power in the world. But at what cost? Tens of thousands of people were affected by the radiation. The fallout spread across West Africa, to Senegal, to Ghana, to Nigeria, even as far as Sudan. And the people who lived near the test sites, the Traore communities who had called the Sahara home for generations, they received no warning, no protection, no compensation. The soldiers sent to observe these tests, to measure the effects. Many of them were Africans. They were ordered to approach the blast sites with minimal protection. Some were sent into the contamination zone just hours after the explosion. They walked through radioactive dust, breathed radioactive air, touched radioactive sand. And what was the purpose? To see what would happen. To use human beings as measuring instruments. For decades, France classified all information about these tests. They denied the extent of the contamination. They refused to acknowledge the health effects. Cancers, birth defects, blindness, sterility. Generations of people have suffered. This is justice? This is the France that lectures us about human rights? I'll end with this. They say I'm radical. They say I'm dangerous. They say I'm destabilizing the region. Let them say what they want. History will judge who truly served Africa and who betrayed it. I am not doing this for personal glory. I could have had a comfortable life, a quiet career, a safe existence. Instead, I chose this path because I believe in something larger than myself. I believe in Africa. I believe in our people. I believe in our future. And I will continue to speak, no matter who it bothers. I will continue to act, no matter the risks. Because silence is complicity. Because inaction is surrender. And I refuse to surrender the future of my people to those who have exploited us for centuries. Africa is rising. A new generation is taking charge. We are not like our fathers who were taught to bow before the colonizer. We know our worth. We know our history. And we know what we must do. The awakening has begun. It cannot be stopped. And when future generations look back at this moment, They will say, this is when Africa finally stood up. This is when Africa finally said, enough. Homeland or death, we shall conquer.